Chapter 1 Who is God? Asked Umba out of the blue. He had a genuine expression of curiosity on his face, like a toddler coming into contact with something new. He continued, I remember when my father's army and I stormed villages, the people shouted, God please no. I didn't know what they were talking about. T'Challa looked at the 15-year-old with deep thought. Umba's confession about the villagers' reactions justified a speculation T'Challa held, that the boy was still mentally scarred from his experiences as a child soldier. As for the question, T'Challa thought of a suitable explanation to give in response. Then he spoke. Well, T'Challa's answer was cut short by Ororo's voice. She was a few steps down from the meditation platform. She was looking at the beautiful evening sky. Her mutant ability allowed her to feel the movements in the wind currents, and she sensed several fast-moving objects approaching the family's house. We have visitors, she said. How many? Inquired T'Challa as he took his sword from the wall. 8, responded Ororo. I will meet them. Then she mentally manipulated the heat and air pressure around her body. That allowed a concentrated amount of thermal wind currents to lift her gracefully. The slender woman twirled twice as the winds carried her swiftly to the boundary of the property. T'Challa turned to Umba. We'll finish the conversation later. Stay here until we say otherwise, the Black Panther said. Okay, said Umba. T'Challa spoke to the time-space computers on his sword's hilt. Take us on top the main roof of the house, he commanded. Instantly he was teleported from the meditation platform to the grand house. The roof was gabled, but T'Challa's keen sense of balance meant he had no problems finding his footing. He stared in the direction Ororo had gone. His hypersensitive eyes zeroed in on her and the 8 visitors. What do we have here? He muttered. The 8 visitors were in technological body armor and they had no face plates. T'Challa immediately recognized the apparent leader from the list of renegade scientists that Nginda had provided. Ororo and the visitors met and they began hovering. The visitors used anti-gravity plates on their legs and arms to keep them in the air. Meanwhile, Ororo rested on a bank of strong wind currents. They spoke for about 3 minutes and then Ororo rang T'Challa on his kimoyo. They want to talk with us, she said. All right, said T'Challa. We're coming now. T'Challa watched as Ororo turned and led the visitors down to the courtyard. T'Challa nimbly ran off the 3-story house and somersaulted onto the courtyard. I'm Mothai, said the leader. I represent my colleagues here. What do you want? Inquired T'Challa. We are leaving Wakanda and giving up our citizenship. We will no longer live under a policy that dissuades scientific knowledge, stated Mothai. You're speaking about the prohibition laws, said Ororo. Unjust laws that kills innovation and experimentation, said Mothai angrily. Those laws protect the citizens from anyone creating dimensional rifts in their home laboratories and other hazardous outcomes from unsanctioned experiments, T'Challa lashed back. But those laws are abused by favoritism and we will not stay another day under them, countered Mothai. So where will you go? Asked Ororo. That is our affairs, shot Mothai. T'Challa stared at him gravely. Don't think that we will allow you to conduct dangerous experiments outside of Wakanda simply because you have given up citizenship. Then we will have to defend ourselves then, Mothai said seriously. So be it and expect a heavy hand from us, said Ororo. Mothai glared at her and he gestured to his friends it was time to depart. Moments later they rocketed into the sky. T'Challa contacted the National Security Division and informed them of the renegade scientists' departure from the country. Make sure that they are escorted out, said T'Challa. During the following hours T'Challa and Ororo spoke at length about the situation with the renegade scientists that had remained in the country. They might also want to leave, T'Challa said. And from the list it appears that several of the top scientists in the military may had also dealt with the group, commented Ororo. If they leave, then we will be facing a brain drain. And state secrets being put out in the wider world. Ororo reflected for a moment, and then she had a serious observation. If Mathai and his group defect to the other superpowers, that will increase the threat of criminals getting their hands on them. Correct, said T'Challa. He also introspected on the fact that he had the most dissidents under his tenure as leader of Wakanda than any other. However, it was Ororo and T'Challa who discovered the centuries-old society of scientists unlawfully performing experiments and projects. He felt better in a way because of that. In the heat of the events, T'Challa forgot about Umba's question, and the boy never brought it up because he realized that his guardians were busy. Elsewhere, Mathai and his group boarded a space shuttle bound for the Cato planetoid in the Alpha Centauri. It was there that they planned to experiment on the boson particle, or the God particle as it was called. They had obtained a formula regarding the control of the particle from a person close to T'Challa and Ororo. The Cato planetoid was the first celestial body that was owned by a private corporation. The Cato Corporation had discovered the planetoid and colonized it. Then the owner, Dr. Cato, created several complexes devoted to scientific study on the planetoid. Scientists mostly from astrophysics, chemistry, and biology were specially invited to live on the planetoid. Thus the place was termed the House of Science. Mathai and his group had been in close contact with Dr. Cato for a number of months, and when they finally obtained the formula, they were invited. For Mathai, it was a liberating step he was taking in his life. The time he spent without performing his unsanctioned experiments had taken a toll on his personal life. He was like an addict who had not had a fix in weeks. It was unbearable for him. Therefore he had no compunctions about permanently leaving Wakanda. This is the start of my new life, he thought while sitting in the seat awaiting the shuttle to lift off. 5 days later. Chapter 2 Warning. Hull breach, blared the complex's AI computer. Mathai ignored the warning, and he ordered his followers out of the womb facility by way of a laser-blasted hole. Their destination was the communications section, half a mile in the left direction. Mentally, Mathai pictured what was occurring in all the complexes. Dr. Cato had explained to him that in the event of an attack, all the dormitories were closed off and the weapons array activated. The residents would be sealed off until further notice from the central computer. But there was no attack on the planetoid at that time. The computer had misinterpreted the outcome of the experiment that had gone all wrong. Dr. Cato and 6 other scientists had gone missing in the manipulation of the God particles, and something otherworldly had emerged from the laboratory. It had frightened Mathai to the core so badly that he knew help was required to face the problem. His only concern was that the other scientists trapped in the complexes were vulnerable to the anomaly. Suddenly he noticed that some of the dormitories were blacking out. Weirdly, he imagined the scientists' pained screams in the darkness. "We have to hurry," he thought. He led the way along the side of the complexes. The spacesuits were equipped with magnetic boots and hooks. They had enough oxygen for about an hour. The progress was slow, and Mathai wondered if he couldn't have prevented the present mess. An hour later, Wakanda's deep space surveillance received a weak signal from the Alpha Centauri star system. When the technicians made out the distorted transmission, they contacted T'Challa and Ororo. The leaders arrived immediately, and they listened to the recording. White noise and breaks distorted it. However, the speaker was clearly Mathai. Calling Wakanda. "This is. We have an Emmer, the Cato planetoid. Require assistance, that is a quick turnaround," muttered T'Challa. "It that all?" inquired Ororo. The technician acknowledged that it was. T'Challa and Ororo then discussed in private whether they should respond to the distress call. "Do you think it is a trap?" asked T'Challa. "It may be," replied Ororo. Then let's go and deal with Mathai, said T'Challa. Thereafter the couple contacted the Space Division and ordered the preparation of the Axel spaceship. Then they went to the Secret Service where they gathered information on the history of the Kato planetoid and the corporation. 20 minutes later, T'Challa and Ororo boarded the spaceship. T'Challa fed the destination coordinates into the ship computer. Afterwards the computer took over the piloting of the ship. The thrust engines on the underside of the nose and the two wings were activated and the plane began to elevate out of the underground hangar. Then the spaceship faced the sky at a 45-degree angle. There was slight jolt as the twin back engines were engaged and they propelled the ship through the sky like an arrow. T'Challa and Ororo experienced level 3 G-forces as the spaceship accelerate out of the Earth's atmosphere. Then the ship leveled out as it prepared for a hyperspace leap. In those few moments T'Challa remembered Umba's question. He stared out the cockpit at the surroundings. It made him feel like everything on Earth was insignificant in the grand scheme of things. He recalled that Ororo had explained to him that she felt there was a designer of the universe because of the intricacies of the natural forces that governed the world. It's too complex to be just random coincidences, she had mentioned. T'Challa was also a physics scientist and an inventor, thus he knew about the scientific theories concerning the creation of the universe. The computer brought T'Challa back to reality. It stated that the hyperleap was prepared. "Activate," said Ororo. 4 additional engines extended out of the spaceship and they fired up. There was a jolt as the ship launched into light speed. Alpha Centauri was the closest star system to Earth's solar system. It would have taken over 10 years for T'Challa and Ororo to reach their destination at normal speed, but the leap allowed them to reach there in mere minutes. "Put up the shield as soon as we emerge from the leap," instructed Ororo to the computer. She thought about her first time in space. She had gone on a mission with the X-Men to an alien civilization and she had ended up being taken as a birthing host for a parasitic creature called the Brood. She had survived the incident and then became linked to an Acanti, more commonly known as a space whale. Then her mind wandered to Umba's question which she heard him ask T'Challa. She also recalled that Umba mentioned his attack on villages. He may need counseling, she thought. Because there might be things he's hiding from himself that will become harmful later in his life. T'Challa turned to her. "What if it is not a trap?" he asked. "Then we help them, and if the problem was due to their experiments then we shut them down completely," said Ororo. "I wonder how long Mathai has known Dr. Kato." T'Challa thought aloud. "Who knows? But this Dr. Kato is also interesting. Remember his file said that he specializes in the birth of the universe field. If it is a true emergency then Dr. Kato may not be in charge since there have been no other transmissions from that sector. Probably. We may have to evacuate the people there also," said Ororo. "Good thing we came with a big enough ship," said T'Challa. "And there is something else that bothers me about Mathai's decision to leave Wakanda. I don't think I ever heard anyone say that didn't want to be a Wakandan." "Why does that bother you?" asked Ororo because she didn't understand what other emotion T'Challa had concerning the events. "To me being a Wakandan is more than an issue of nationality. The country is a part of you. The people are a part of you. You're looking at it from the perspective of the Black Panther. It would be natural for you to view being a Wakandan that way. But it may not necessarily be the same with other citizens." Evidently Mathai believed that his passion for science was greater than his loyalty to Wakanda, said Ororo. T'Challa conceded that she was correct. At that point the computer informed them that the hyperleap was almost completed. "Well, here goes nothing," said T'Challa. The customary jolt occurred as the ship's additional engines stopped. But then there were other jolts to the ship. "We are under attack," said the computer. T'Challa and Ororo saw the multiple energy beams that bombarded the ship. They came from laser cannons on the surface of the Kato planetoid. "Good thing we had the shield in place," remarked T'Challa. "But the hits it is taking is diminishing it," warned Ororo as she stared at the monitor that handled the electromagnetic shield. "I'll fix that," said T'Challa. "Computer, go to manual mode." He took control of the ship and began making evasive maneuvers. Ororo slid the weapons control keypad in front of her, and she activated the 5 laser cannons on the sides of the ship and the lone one on the underside. She took aim at the planetoid's defenses and fired randomly. Explosions began appearing on the surface as the spaceship defended itself from the assault. Abruptly the computer said, "We have a transmission from the planetoid." "Put it through," said Ororo. The computer sent the video message to the center monitor. The image was wavy and perpetuated by white noise. Then the image was lost. "What happened?" asked T'Challa while busy avoiding the onslaught of enemy fire. "Transmission was interrupted by the energy disturbances around the planetoid," responded the computer. "Try to regain a connection," commanded Ororo. The computer obliged. "Only an audio connection is possible," the machine stated. "Then do it," said Ororo. A minute later, Mothai's voice came through the speakers. It too was plagued by white noise. "Who is this?" asked Mothai. "T'Challa and me," answered Ororo. "What is going on down there?" "Good you came. I can see your ship. There is practically a safe zone in the planetoid's 4th quadrant. Land there and then we can." Mothai was cut off. "Signal lost," explained the computer. "We'll take the bait," said T'Challa, and he slanted the ship. Then he headed for the location indicated. Mothai was correct. The enemy fire was less in that area. "Find us an airlock if possible," T'Challa told the computer. "One found," said the efficient machine. T'Challa gave an expression that showed his surprise at the speed in which the computer had completed its task. "Mothai sounded sincere enough," Ororo remarked. "True," said T'Challa. "There are supposed to be over 200 people in the complexes. They may need medical attention if indeed there was a serious accident. We should carry a few things with us just in case." Ororo left the weapon system on automatic. T'Challa guided the ship alongside one of the complexes. He positioned it next to the airlock. Then he and Ororo disembarked. They carried medical supplies, a few packets of food and water. As a precaution, they wore spacesuits that had magnetically chargeable boots and jetpacks. The suits were not bulky but streamlined for easier maneuverability. There were many hydraulics in the joints to increase motion and reflex speed. They entered the complex that had minimal power, hence there were several places in complete darkness. They checked their chemoyos to see if they still connected to the ship. "We are getting interference," stated T'Challa as he heard the white noise on the line. Ororo looked about the dormant corridor. "Should we wait on Mothai?" she pondered. There was the other problem of her claustrophobia. "I have to be prepared to fight that at any moment. We can't afford to be hampered by my weakness," Ororo said internally. T'Challa carried most of the heavy cases of medical supplies because of his superhuman strength. He used his hypersense of smell to search for humans. "Anything?" asked Ororo, who knew how her husband operated. "The scents are about 2 hours old," he responded. "We should stay a while before heading out," Ororo suggested. "About 20 minutes, T'Challa said. "That's enough time," said Ororo. "It looks to me like everything was placed on lockdown. Could it be that Mothai is being held against his wishes? And he called us in to bail him out," said T'Challa along the same line of speculation. But why did he call us? The thought had just occurred to him. You mean why he didn't contact SWORD? They are closer, said Ororo. S.W.O.R.D was a sanctioned organization that protected Earth from alien threats and dealt with all of Earth's deep space matters. Suddenly the planetoid shook violently like an earthquake. Ororo and T'Challa held their ground as the shaking continued. It ended after 2 minutes. We have seismic activity now, said T'Challa. Maybe they built a structure underground that is damaged, or there might be pipes. T'Challa went silent as his hyper-hearing picked up on the movement of a human. Someone banged on the other side of the right wall. The banging followed a pattern and Ororo understood that it was Morse code. Whoever it is says to stand back from the wall, Ororo said. All right, said T'Challa. She knocked on the wall in the code to say that the message was received. Then she backed away. Soon a laser was cutting through the wall. The couple waited patiently for the process to finish. When it was completed and the cutout was thrown down, T'Challa's sense of smell locked onto Mothai. A weathered Mothai emerged. He carried a flashlight and a small first aid kit. He was alone. Then he spoke first. We have to shut down the main computer. It has people trapped in the complexes, said Mothai. What happened here? Asked T'Challa. What do you think happened? Said Mothai. You messed up, shot T'Challa. Mothai wiped the sweat from his forehead. In a way yes, but if you look at it another way. We achieved something monumental, he said. The computer terminal is this way. He returned through the hole and the couple followed. Chapter 3 We did it. We created a mini-universe, Mothai said excitedly as he guided T'Challa and Ororo through the corridors. They looked at him with indifference. We recreated the exact events that occurred during the creation of our universe, Mothai continued. We went through the Planck epoch on the first day. T'Challa translated the term for Ororo's benefit. That's the approximate speed of creation, temperature level and gravitational degree at the time of the universe's creation. On the second day we worked on the quarks and anti-quarks. We even got the heat levels correct. The third day was the most activity. The God particles responded astoundingly. The protons and mass creation followed quickly. And what happened on the fourth day? Inquired Ororo. Mothai paused. Everything became stable and we began to investigate what we had created. And on the fifth day all hell broke loose, said T'Challa with authority. Where is Dr. Kato? He and 6 others disappeared into the mini-universe, said Mothai. And something else happened. An anomaly emerged from the universe and it's making its way through the complexes. Do you know what caused it? Asked Ororo. No, said Mothai, and another thing. The anomaly is invisible. My colleagues and I can sense it. It seems attracted to living tissue, which it consumes. I have witnessed one of its attacks. And I think it can pass through the walls. T'Challa couldn't believe what he was hearing. Where did the experiment take place? Interrogated T'Challa. In the womb complex, answered Mothai. Does it run underground? Inquired Ororo. Yes. It is causing the tremors, replied Mothai. By the way, where are your techno-armor suits? Inquired Ororo. They were placed in storage and the computer controls that, answered Mothai. He stopped at a port window and pointed, there is the central computer terminal housing. The couple peered through the window. They saw a covered area the size of a football pitch. There was a ring of 5 dormant sentinel robots at the center. In the middle of the ring was a 6-foot tube. The computer is at the bottom of the tube, stated Mothai. So are we to destroy it? Asked T'Challa. No, You just have to shut off its emergency security protocol, responded Ma Thai. Very well, then let us proceed, said Ororo. Chapter 4. Ororo knew her powers would have a limited effect in the battle because of the lack of an appropriate atmosphere in which to manipulate. I'll take on the computer while you deal with the robots, she said to T'Challa. Got it, he said. The couple left the supplies with Ma Thai and they entered the area. The robots were 7 feet tall and large. Intruder alert, shouted the computer. Here we go, said T'Challa. He pressed a button on his sword's hilt and a nano-robot sheathing slid off the dark force energy blade. The robots came alive. Their shoulder laser cannons hummed. Then astonishingly the robots dematerialized and in the end disappeared. We have to be careful on how we damage these robots. They must use an atomic core to power their teleportations. Most likely the reactor cells are in their chests, said T'Challa. There was a sharp noise as the ceiling began retracting, exposing the area to outer space. Immediately there was a depressurizing effect as anything loose was sucked out into space. Calmly T'Challa and Ororo activated their oxygen tanks in the face masks and the jetpacks. Then they spoke over their communications links. Looks like I have the advantage again, said Ororo happily since she could manipulate loose hydrogen atoms from space into the area and ignite them. T'Challa liked the chattiness that Ororo brought in a fight. It contrasted his usual silent mode of operating. But can you sense the robots? She asked. No, said T'Challa as he concentrated intensely for the fraction of a second when the robots would appear. Well, we can't stay here, said Ororo. You watch my back and I'll watch yours. Okay, said T'Challa. I'll teleport us now to the top of the tube. The couple placed their backs to each other and were carried to the tube by the sword. Then T'Challa sensed the faint change in the surroundings as the first of the robots reappeared. The Black Panther pinpointed the direction of the attacker and he held Ororo's arm to spin her away. Then he raised his sword to parry the expected laser fire from the robot. It happened a second later. The robot fully appeared and it released a volley of cannon fire at the couple. T'Challa parried the first 3 shots with the large blade of his sword, then he batted the rest of the energy beams back at the robot's head, destroying it. Another robot appeared on the opposite side. By that time Ororo had manipulated a great deal of hydrogen atoms into the vicinity. Her eyes glowed as she mentally caused the hydrogen atoms to explode in front of the robot. The machine was pushed away and it slammed into another robot that was returning. The impact was like 2 tankers colliding. I'm going in now, said Ororo. Then she somersaulted into the tube opening and headed downwards. The inside was barely lighted. She made out the light blue top of the computer that was at the base of the tube. She sensed an electromagnetic presence over the computer. Then to Ororo's horror a crisscrossed series of laser beams formed in her path and began heading for her. Instinctively she stopped her descent and looked back at the top of the tube. Another crisscrossed series of laser beams were also there and coming at her. Good God, she exclaimed in her mind. Instinctively Ororo grabbed the 2 utility laser knives from her belt. Then she put her knees to her chest and almost formed the fetus position. She placed one knife above her head and the other below her. She spun quickly and slashed the walls of the tube with the knives, hoping to destroy the cells that emitted the laser beams. Then the moment came to find out if it had worked. For the laser beam trap closed on her. Ororo held her breath and removed her hands from the danger. If she failed, then the beams would dissect her. The laser beams died when they came across the broken emitter cells. Thank God, thought Ororo. Then she proceeded to the computer in a cautious manner. She removed the electromagnetic field with a mere thought since she could manipulate such forces. Mothai had stated that the computer operated through voice commands and it could be reasoned with. "What is your objective?" inquired Ororo. "Protection of Kato facilities and personnel," said the computer in a strong masculine voice. "Kato facilities and personnel are safe," said Ororo. "End protocol." "Negative. Kato facilities have been invaded." "End protocol now," commanded Ororo. "Request incompatible," said the computer. Ororo lost her patience. "I will permanently deactivate you if the protocol isn't ended now," she said forcefully. The computer went silent. "Don't take all day to make the decision," slammed Ororo. "Protocol being ended." "Great," said Ororo. "What is the status of the personnel?" "There have been 50 fatalities." "What caused them?" "Unknown." Ororo suspected it was the anomaly Mothai spoke about. "Do you detect anything inhuman in the complexes?" asked Ororo. "None," responded the machine. Ororo nodded in disappointment. "Open the storage area where the techno-armor suits are kept," ordered Ororo. "Operation completed," said the computer. "For the time being, send a warning beacon to any ships in the vicinity. Tell them that there is a problem on the Kato planetoid and to avoid it. Also that T'Challa and Ororo, the leaders of Wakanda, are taking care of the situation. Then send a message to the S.W.O.R.D space station informing them of the situation," said Ororo. "Affirmative," said the computer. Then Ororo remembered the retracted ceiling. At that point she heard the fight between T'Challa and the robots. "Return the enclosure to this area," she said, "and turn off the sentinels." "Affirmative." Then she departed. Chapter 5 T'Challa, Ororo, and Mothai met a host of frightened scientists and staff as they went to the storage hold. Some had stories of close escapes from the invisible killer in the complexes. Thus the scientists wanted to immediately leave the planetoid. "You cannot do that right now," objected T'Challa. "We don't know the nature of the anomaly and we need to avoid exposing others to it via either contamination or providing safe passage for that thing. So in the meantime we will stay on the planetoid until the anomaly is neutralized." That caused an uproar by the scientists and Mothai was forced to do something he never expected: defend T'Challa. "He's correct," said Mothai. "We can't risk letting this thing loose in the galaxy." Even Ororo was shocked that Mothai was acting so responsibly. "So this is the plan," said T'Challa commandingly. "Mothai's associates will stay with the survivors. A few will search the complexes for others. Meanwhile, Ororo, Mothai and I will go to the womb complex to find out the reason this thing is among us and how to correct it." There were a few mummers against the plan, but eventually the majority agreed. Then T'Challa sensed the anomaly. It was in the vicinity of where the party had stopped to discuss the course of action. It was an unnerving experience as T'Challa interpreted the anomaly's nature as that of a large predator prowling through a forest. "It is nearby, so let us keep moving," said T'Challa. The sudden threat silenced the detractors and everyone hurried to the storage section. There they met Mothai's associates. They were already in the techno suits as Mothai had planned before he had ventured to T'Challa's and Ororo's location. Mothai then suited up in the armor. The design of the armor reminded T'Challa of a fellow hero called War Machine, a person who the Black Panther was not always on good terms with. Mothai's anti-gravity panels were useless in space, so he utilized the thrust engines on his back. "It's better that we travel outside the complexes to the womb," suggested Mothai to Black Panther and Storm. The couple agreed. Soon they were flying towards the destination. The sun at the center of Alpha Centauri was almost overhead. Luckily the planetoid was a far distance away from the center of the solar system. There was an inconsistency in Mathai's story about the experiment that puzzled T'Challa. How did they stabilize the God particles in the first place? T'Challa pondered. The Black Panther recalled that the former head of the renegade scientist's body in Wakanda was also interested in the God particle, and he had harassed Umba's girlfriend to help him solve an equation vital to keeping the God particle in check during experiments. The equation was never solved to T'Challa's knowledge. So the Black Panther baited Mathai to find out the truth. Mathai, I need to see all the formulas used in the experiment as soon as we get there, said T'Challa. All right, said Mathai, unawares of the setup. He was focusing on the events that occurred prior to the disappearance of Dr. Kato. There was nothing I could have done, he finally admitted to himself, and it eased his guilt. The womb complex stood tall on the planetoid's icy surface. Mathai remembered where he had escaped from. There, he pointed to the spot and descended to it. T'Challa and Ororo followed. Mathai fired an energy blast from his right palm into the repaired area. It created a new breach. The three quickly entered before the hull repaired the damage. The booming sound of a mini-universe gone awry greeted the team. Light rays flooded out the center of the laboratory that went down into the planetoid's core. Occasionally loose particles shot through the walls and left burning holes. Where are the formulas? Asked T'Challa. Mathai came out his daze and he walked over to the still-functioning main laboratory computer. He typed in the command codes and it brought up the items T'Challa were interested in. How much astrophysics do you know? Asked Mathai. Enough, said T'Challa as he scanned through the information. Unbeknownst to the team, Dr. Kato emerged from the mini-universe that was at the bottom of the complex. He was in the atomic form that he changed himself into prior to entering the mini-verse. Still, he had changed during the explosion that had occurred in the mini-universe when he was exploring it. He had experienced all the expected wonders of a new universe expanding. Unfortunately, his exploration colleagues did not survive. Half sane, Dr. Kato lumbered up the platforms towards where he vaguely heard voices. His feet burned into the metal steps. His hands melted the surfaces that they rested on. And his 8-foot-tall, lanky, glowing body was enough to scare the bravest of souls. Ororo sensed him. Something is coming up, she said. By the time T'Challa and Mathai had turned to her, Dr. Kato was already upon them. The radiation measurement indicators on all their suits began beeping. Mathai recognized the face. Kato, he said. Mathai, I have seen it. It is marvelous. I can actually see the particles as they work, said Kato. T'Challa intervened before they lost sight of the objective. An anomaly came out of the experiment. It is killing people, said the Black Panther. Who are you? Inquired Kato. He is T'Challa. The one I spoke of, said Mathai. Oh, said Kato, betraying in his tone that ill things were mentioned at T'Challa's expense. Mathai's communicator came on. It was his associates and they told him that the anomaly was closing in on them. Mathai told the gathering, and T'Challa had an idea on how to gain information on the anomaly. Kato, hopefully you can view the anomaly better than we can, said T'Challa. And find out what it really is. Sure, said Kato. Tell your comrades that Kato and I are on our way, said T'Challa to Mathai. Chapter 6 T'Challa and Kato teleport to the storage area. The Black Panther had the survivors flee the vicinity while he waited for the anomaly. I'll use myself as bait, he thought. T'Challa sensed the approaching anomaly. It's coming, he said to Kato. Once its secrets are known, what will we do with it? Kato inquired. Destroy it, said T'Challa nonchalantly. Kato frowned. The reason he disliked T'Challa and others like him returned, they discouraged discovery. "I can't allow you to do that," he said and pointed to the Black Panther. A bolt of energy erupted from the hand. T'Challa reacted swiftly and he somersaulted out of the path. However, the bolt tore through the wall. It caused the area to depress. Therefore T'Challa and Kato were sucked out onto the planetoid's surface. "I have to hurt him before uses his full power," thought T'Challa. He activated the jetpack and leveled out himself. Then he pushed forward at Kato. The Black Panther slashed through the scientist's stomach and dissected him in half. Kato grinned. "I'm a god," he muttered. Then his body became whole again. "No, you're not," shouted T'Challa. Then the Black Panther whispered to the sword, "Return me to the womb." T'Challa disappeared in a golden flash. Kato guessed his destination. The scientist flew into the storage area and he encountered the floating anomaly. "Don't be afraid. I'm your creator," said Kato. The anomaly was half the size of Kato. Its shape reminded Kato of a bacterium. "You're so beautiful. How could I allow you to be destroyed?" "Come with me," said Kato. The anomaly followed him. They headed for the womb. Chapter 7. Meanwhile, Ororo and Mothai were discussing the mini-universe. "How do you shut down the experiment?" asked Ororo. "We never intended to shut it down. But if it had to be, then the God particles would have to be removed from inside the universe since they gave it mass," responded Mothai. T'Challa appeared shortly after and he told them the situation. "Most likely he will be coming here," said Ororo. "And my sword can't stop him," said T'Challa. Mothai glared at them. "Why must he be stopped in the first place?" T'Challa returned his stare, but with more ferocity. "Because there is a chance that your unstable experiment will generate another anomaly. It has to be shut down." "Mothai and I were just discussing that very same issue," said Ororo. "He spoke of removing the God particles. And another thing about the experiment. The universe is expanding more quickly than you expected it. Soon the planetoid's core would not be able to contain it. What do you think will happen when the experiment comes directly in contact with this universe?" said T'Challa heatedly. "We have to plan for Kato's arrival," said Ororo. "So where do you stand?" T'Challa asked Mothai. "Either it's safeguarding your experiment or the galaxy. It's your choice." Stubbornly Mothai began removing his armor. "I can change into the same form that Kato is in," he said in a tone that suggested that he was not in full agreement with what had to be done. "The chamber is on the other side of the laboratory. I will lure Kato into the experiment and then remove the God particles." He began walking away before T'Challa and Ororo reacted. "Hopefully I can make it back before the whole thing collapses on me," Mothai continued. "How long will the transformation take?" inquired T'Challa. "A few minutes," said Mothai before he disappeared. "Do you trust him?" asked Ororo. "Kind of," replied T'Challa. "How about you?" "I didn't expect the sudden change. I thought he was going to give us more opposition," said Ororo. "Did you spot any weaknesses in Kato?" "None. He is almost like the Silver Surfer. The most we can do is delay him until Mothai finishes." "I have an idea," said Ororo. "Let's bring the robot sentinels here. We can use them as shields. Kato is going to realize that he can't totally destroy them without disrupting their atomic core. And if the cores exploded, it would further damage the laboratory." "I like it," said T'Challa. "The only problem is if he calls our bluff and does blow up the robots," said Ororo. "Give me the sword. I'll get the computer to turn over control of the sentinels." T'Challa handed over his sword and Ororo used it to teleport to the computer terminal. In quick time, she got control of the 2 remaining robots and then she returned with them to the laboratory. She found T'Challa downloading the formulas onto his Kimoyo. "I have to check out a few of these things," he remarked. Then T'Challa and Ororo activated the robots. T'Challa sensed the anomaly approaching, and Ororo sensed Kato. "The anomaly is coming," stated T'Challa. "So is Kato," said Ororo. "Let's get ready." The couple positioned themselves near the robots. "How do we handle the anomaly?" asked Ororo. "We trick it," replied T'Challa. "We get it to follow us into the experiment. Then teleport before we actually enter the mini-universe. You can manipulate the heat factor that comes from the experiment so we don't burn to death." "What kind of heat are we talking about?" "Near sun level," said T'Challa with a slight grin. Ororo gave a light laugh because of the suicidal plan. "And what is to keep it from returning?" she asked. "Look. Are you serious?" "Yes. I'm hoping that the anomaly is actually a body of anti-life particles since they only react negatively with living tissue. Hopefully when they recombine with the experiment they will fall back into their natural state before the accident occurred." "I like that explanation better," said Ororo with a grin. "I didn't want to bore you with the details," said T'Challa. "I actually like it when you say the details," said Ororo in a sexy tone. Then she became serious when Kato's presence was extremely nearer. The scientist and the anomaly entered through the main laboratory entrance. Kato saw T'Challa and Ororo hiding behind the robots. He prepared to shoot at them. T'Challa saw him. "Remember these, Kato. They have atomic cores. You hit them and this laboratory will be destroyed." "All your research," shouted T'Challa. Kato hesitated. "Not a problem, T'Challa," said the scientist and he motioned the anomaly to attack the humans. "Here it comes," said T'Challa. "Time to move." He and Ororo turned on their jetpacks and flew towards the outer ring of the experiment and then they descended. The anomaly followed closely. The expected high temperature came and Ororo manipulated it away from her and T'Challa. "Sword on my mark," said T'Challa. The couple came upon the surface of the experiment that was like a lake of combusting energy. Their radiation measurement instruments screamed. Meanwhile T'Challa sensed that the anomaly had gained on them. The couple was nearly at the surface and they felt a strong gravitational pull to the experiment. Ororo became concerned that the time-space computers would be not able to navigate the frequent gravitational fluxes. "I hope this works," she said internally. T'Challa pondered on how soon he should order the teleportation. Too soon and the anomaly may escape. Too late and he along with Ororo would die. The anomaly came too close for comfort and they were nearly upon on the experiment. Now or never, thought T'Challa. "Teleport," he shouted. The time-space computers struggled for a few seconds more with the sudden gravitational fluxes. Then they prevailed and the couple disappeared. The anomaly went straight into the experiment and was consumed by it. T'Challa and Ororo returned to Kato's presence. "Remarkable," said Kato, who was surprised. "Nevertheless," he said, "in your absence I took the liberty of removing the atomic cores from the robots. There is nowhere you can hide again." He held up the core cells in his hands. "Where's Mathai?" pondered T'Challa. Then Kato forced the core cells into his chest and absorbed them. "Farewell," he said as he pointed his hands at the couple. Ororo sensed another being like Kato approaching. It was Mathai. "Enough, Kato," shouted Mathai emphatically. The scientist turned to his former colleague. "You side with them. After all the injustices they did to you," said Kato. The experiment is a disaster right now. But it can be shut down and redone, explained Ma Thai. No one will interfere with my work, shouted Kato vehemently. Our work, corrected Ma Thai. Another tremor occurred. T'Challa and Ororo began hovering on their jetpacks. Meanwhile Ma Thai used the opportunity to charge into Kato. They clashed like titans, but Ma Thai was the superior combatant because of his Wakandan training. He grappled Kato and managed to force him over the edge of the ring. They both fell. All the while, Ma Thai landed a series of punches to Kato's face. Eventually they crashed into the experiment and disappeared. Once inside, Ma Thai was confounded with new sensations and abilities. He concentrated immediately on the God particles. He was able to destabilize them. However, Kato tried to stop him. At that moment Ma Thai knew he was not going to make it back alive. Yet he battled on. He did enough to force the mini-universe to collapse. In the laboratory the tremor subsided. T'Challa and Ororo waited for Ma Thai's return, but as the lake of energy became still and black they knew what had happened. Soon the experiment died and became silent. Poor Ma Thai, said Ororo. In the end he did the right thing, more or less, said T'Challa. Afterwards, the couple found the survivors and organized them to be taken to the S.W.O.R.D space station. Chapter 9 T'Challa and Ororo spoke with Abigail Brand, the commander of SWORD. They were in her office. Actually, we intercepted the distress call from the Kato planetoid, informed Brand. But since that place was off to limit to us because Kato knew people in high places, we couldn't do a thing. Then Brand stared at T'Challa intently. Kato was not the only one with connections. Presently on this station Ulysses Claw is speaking with several governments on the issue of his vibranium find, said Brand. T'Challa bolted out of his chair and he slammed his hands on the table. Where? He demanded in rage. Section B13, replied Brand. I was not allowed access to the meeting. But if I were pursuing you from harming Claw, then it would not be a problem. She had satisfied smile on her face. The Black Panther's blood boiled as he remembered seeing Claw assassinate his father. Then let's go then, said Ororo. T'Challa gave the sword the coordinates and all three disappeared.